how do we bring people back? How do we have more connection, more conversations, also based in, I think of something that's really hard these days is to have a conversation based around facts, because, people say, oh, that's not true, or there's this big pushback on what's true or what isn't true, depending on, which news station put it out, or no, that's not true because of this. That makes it really hard to have a conversation, because facts aren't facts anymore.
Yeah.
They're opinions that
100%.
are interpreted different by different people.
Welcome back to our second episode of Strong Brother, Strong Sister Foundation podcast. Before we do start, just like to acknowledge the lands that we are meeting on today and recording this podcast on, the lands of the Wadawurrung people. Pay my respects to their country, their elders, past, present, emerging, their culture, their songlines, their stories, and so much more. And it's a true privilege to be on Wadawurrung country, and truly grateful for the opportunities it's provided us. Also extending my respects and to all the lands across our different countries, and my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to all First Nations people. My name's Cormach Evans. I'm a proud Yorta Yorta man and the founder and managing director here at Strong Brother, Strong Sister Foundation, and joined again by brother Keeden Graham, a Yorta Yorta, Wiradjuri, and Jar Jar Wurrung man. Hey, Bruss, welcome back.
What's going on? How are you?
I'm good.
Good?
Good. We've had a few takes. We're getting there now, which is good. It's getting used to it. So that's good, Bruss.
Yeah, no, it's good. Well, I thought we'd jump straight in.
Yeah, mad.
So last episode, we kind of finished talking about that we're going to have a chat about the referendum this time. And so thought we'd go a little bit before the referendum and talk in the lead up, I guess, some of the community views and some of the messaging and some of the responses, whether that was positive or negative by different communities. And specifically, I wanted to ask yourself, living in Darwin, where, it was probably a little bit more conservative in nature in terms of the government and some of the, I guess some of the people that live there, and it's got quite a racist history. What were some of the key, I guess, messaging or responses that you saw living up there?
Yeah, I think, good question, Bruss. I think, when they announced it, I guess my own personal opinion was skeptical, I guess, and a bit, and fearful as well. I think just knowing, and seeing firsthand, racism, discrimination, and witnessing and being a part of that, in terms of having that directed at yourself, whether it's when I was in school, or on a day-to-day basis or whatever, and especially living in the NT, like just even as for myself, going to the shops and getting followed around by security guards or whatever. It's such a prevalent thing up there, and you look at all the different, I guess, situations up there, and it's still very well and alive, definitely in the Northern Territory. And I think, I think it really created space for all the rednecks and racists and hatred, which is really crazy. And that wasn't just alone in the NT, that was, nationally, I'd say. And that's my personal opinion. But yeah, just driving around and seeing, billboards and, different signs on the side of the road that were quite hurtful to First Nations people, and just assumptions of, who we are and how we live our lives. It's always a thing that people assume all this, sort of negative and hurtful things about First Nations people, and you cannot not take it on board, and you can't, it's always, no matter how prepared you are or how many supports around you have, you always are gonna, take something on board and feel, a certain way based on trauma that we've all experienced as a result of racism and hurtful situations. So yeah.
Yeah, no, completely. Understand what you're saying in terms of, obviously it's so loaded, like it's such a loaded, question. Like, do you give Aboriginal people a voice? Like, as soon as you even put that out there, it's quite confronting in terms of, if people say no, and how we even got to that being, what we're voting on, I thought was kind of interesting too. Like
100%.
it felt like nationally, maybe, even the Aboriginal community, like you said, was skeptical or maybe didn't have input from, every community and and as nature, that government tends to rush processes a lot. And because this was probably such a sensitive topic in terms of the question, if no, like you said, can pose a lot of trauma or impact on First Nations community, probably needed a longer process and more consultation to even get to that
100%.
I guess, idea of the voice. Because I don't know about you, but obviously back, our ancestors and people before us were always talking about treaty.
Yep.
And, that's something that still seems to not be there on a federal level for
100%.
some reason. I don't exactly know why. Maybe it's because treaty, they were a bit afraid of what that might mean, whereas the voice kind of sat a little bit like, had no real power at the end of the day. And so I think it was conflicting on all fronts, whether it was from the community, like First Nations support behind it. There was a pretty powerful misinformation campaign led by, the Liberal government and specifically Jacinta Price.
Yeah.
She had a big impact in terms of saying that it was going to take away all, non-Indigenous people's rights and
100%.
things like that. So I think, all those factors kind of didn't help and kind of really took it into something bigger and I guess more extreme than it probably, if we took more time and proper process, we could have reached, I guess, a more logical outcome that hopefully could have gotten more community support behind it as well.
Oh, 100%. And I think like at the end of the day, if the government was really committed to backing First Nations people and a voice, the simplest thing is just to make an amendment, and the government had the power to be able to do that as well, to just change the law to recognise us in the Constitution. And it didn't have to go to a referendum, and I think that was the biggest thing for me personally is like, why can't, if you really value First Nations people, just change it, make us a part, one, of the Constitution, two, recognise the history of First Nations people and what's, happened over 250 years, but also recognise the 60 to 80,000 or more years that's come before settlers and colonisation. I think, and then same thing with treaty. We're the only country in the world that hasn't got a treaty in terms of with their First Peoples, which is just insane. And it just seems to be Australia's behind. We're always the ones following everyone else or just lacking. You look at, change the subject for a second, just even today with the cost of living crisis, and there's so many opportunities to, make money as a government that takes the stress off the people that vote these people in. Realistically, you look at gas and fossil fuels and everything, and those big corporations don't pay a cent in tax. Yet we have a housing crisis, we have a cost of living crisis, we have homelessness at crazy rates, and all these things that we could change in the click of a finger. Yet these people in these positions of power are more worried about holding that position of power rather than the actual people that they're meant to serve.
And also worried about if they make things more equitable, that, they're going to lose some of their power or
100%.
money or privilege, which is obviously not the case at all.
100%. So it's a corrupt system, that just doesn't work and has never been in favour of the people. And people will say, we'll have people probably comment on this and, rednecks comment on this to say, well, that's going against what you just said. But it's like, it's just such a simple thing of a voice. But like you said, there was no real power. And it's just, having people that have knowledge and experience and expertise and professionals, doctors, professors, scientists, whatever, that are First Nations people to inform the government on issues that relate to First Nations people. Like it makes complete sense.
Yeah. And it's also interesting because anytime something unjust happens, whether it's in your personal life, you can see quite clearly, but it seems like those that oppress have kind of a different view on what's, they don't see that as injustice. They see that as their, God-given right, or this is their superior as, as a people. Whereas
100%.
I feel like something that might happen in their personal life that would be unjust, they will, rally behind and have a really strong
100%.
opinion. But when it comes to seeing the experiences of different minorities that have, been marginalized, that's not a connection that some people are able to make.
100%.
I think that's really a key part of why this is such a struggle, is because, and that's why truth telling, obviously it's important to tell the truth, but it's important for people to understand and really put themselves in those shoes, because unless they can, see some kind of empathy or understanding for the situation that's, been happening for the last 250 years, it's going to be pretty hard to change minds, or at least have, some kind of, I guess, reckoning with our true history.
100%.
No, that was, I think a great kind of period just before the referendum. If we want to bring it maybe to the referendum result, and maybe talk about, night of, or night, when I guess we found out what the result was, and, the percentage of no versus yes vote, and also the percentage in, where you live, and where, down here on Wadawurrung country, what that was as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, I cried. I think, and like I've got 2 kids, those who don't know. So for me, it was just like their futures, and, and reliving those moments in my own head, I guess, of my experience as a child growing up, and then also as an adult, or a teenager and a young adult, and experiencing, just many different situations that were confronting and were hurtful and whatever else. And so I was fearful for my kids, but also all the kids I work with here as well, and so, but then in saying that, I think that's where I thrive as well. Like that next day, I went to set up pretty late and sort of processed it and really go through the emotions and feel it and heal, and sort of really be able to understand it, feel it, heal, and then heal from it. And obviously not rush that healing process. But the next day I woke up and I was like, excuse my language, but I was like, fuck that. Like, we need to go more than ever now, and we need to fight. The spears come out, so to speak, and brother Nookie, who's a good friend of ours, played treaty on Triple J, like non-stop, and mad respect to brother Nookie and everyone else, that is doing the fight. But I went straight to a local First Nations org that does similar work to us, Jai Cardona, and Jai runs and founded Brother to Another, which is a Aboriginal youth org up on Larrakia country that works predominantly with young men that are being involved in the youth justice system, and doing amazing work. And so just went and saw Jai, and I was like, Bus, let's do this. We need to, this is now, we need to fight. Let's sharpen those spears. We need to protect all these kids, and protect our people. And I think that was a really, really powerful moment for us, and for me, like for both of us, both Jai and I, but also for me personally, to ensure that my kids are going to be okay, and all kids are going to be okay, and the people around us. And, the boys from Brother to Another ran a community night just for people to come and sit and, and gather and talk and feel together. And I think the beauty in that is powerful, because what comes from that, the resilience of First Nations people is crazy, but we shouldn't always have to be so resilient, but it's just how it is, because that's the only way we can survive, is to continue to fight.
I guess also what it shows, which, you can look at it 2 ways, but it really shows how this country thinks. And I think to have that data is actually really valuable.
100%.
Because it can help inform a lot of the decisions, you'll make, or Jai will make, or different community members will make in regards to, like you said, protecting our kids, helping them be strong and in who they are and their identity, and helping them, stand tall and proud to walk as, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia. So I think even though it was extremely confronting, that data is actually, really critical to how we move forward and how we, try to impact change going
100%.
forward. It seems overall, not just in Australia, but, in the US and other countries, that there has been more conservative views or even, far right kind of views be more, I guess, socially acceptable. And like we're seeing that, with other issues and topics, not just First Nations, whether it's the trans community or different, I'm thinking of why do you think that is, happening? And I guess what do you think is maybe some ways in which we, especially as First Nations, or could combat that or kind of use, we talked about our resilience and ability to come together and, for a long time as well, encourage people to walk alongside us, which has been a real strength. So how do we use some of our, I guess, strengths as community to, I guess, combat the shift we're seeing in, far right kind of conservative views, not only in Australia, but worldwide?
Oh, 100%. I think, first of all, I think, it's just wild to think that, like realistically, more than 1 in 2 people said no, which is pretty, it's pretty crazy and hurtful to walk around in a, imagine like just going to the supermarket. And it's like, holy moly.
What were the stats in in Darwin specifically, in your community? It would have been higher than 1 in 2,
Yeah, it was sort of like, it was ranging anywhere from sort of 60s to 80s, I think. That's off the top of my head. I could be wrong, but I think based on what I remember, it's around that. I think there was, like you said, I think it's really one of those things where we need people to walk along. Those people that have been for quite some time, we need them to continue on, but we need them to understand that we can't always carry the flame, so to speak, or keep it, that's because it's tiring. And then when we have to educate people, that's tiring. And we have to, because it's just reliving this whole thing. So, we can't have it all sit on our shoulders, so to speak. And we need people there to walk alongside us, like you said, and to fight the fight. And realistically, it's whether it's just, not tolerating, the hate and the everything. And that's globally, I think, as well. You look at what's happening over in Palestine and the genocide that's happening over there right now, and just how, right now it's hardly in the media anymore, which is crazy. And I was at the where was I? I was at a fish and chip shop the other day. And anyway, he's a Greek fella and he was complaining about it. How, that he was complaining that Greens have lost their way and, they're advocating for stuff overseas around genocide and, all this stuff. It's like, what if that was your community and your people? Oh, that's different. It's like, what?
Yeah.
How is that fair? And how you're just contradicting what you just said. Like it's, sort of thing. And so it's like, I feel my personal opinion is life now is so fast. It's how can I get rich quick? And we've lost those really key and core human values.
Connection. And, talking and 100%. Having conversations. And
and I think that comes down to also like voting too. People are voting based on greed.
Yeah.
And not humanity and not the environment.
Yeah.
And
and also lies too.
Yeah,
a lot of time lies that they're being told or misinformation and
100%.
Yeah.
And social media plays a huge role, as we know, because people like Elon Musk's and all those crew, that have these big platforms are profiting off hatred.
Yeah.
And so they're feeding this thing to be able to make sure that they can make cash. But at the same time, there's no one sort of overseeing hatred, all these things that are really crazy, that if you had empathy and kindness and a good heart, you wouldn't tolerate that. So why is it different for other people? Like you expect that for your family and everyone else, but you can't see for humankind. Like it's this funny thing that I still can't understand because it's just so different to how I've been brought up. Ways, like I'll happily give the shirt off my back to anyone that needs it because it's the right thing to do. We all feel and we all, so I think it's really, it's a funny thing to try and understand in many ways.
No, I think like you said, in this environment specifically, where media, a lot of the time they make money off fear and a lot of times hatred and, pitting people against each other.
Yep.
And when you live in an environment where that is what's driving people's decision-making and people's opinions and how they vote,
yep.
I think that's when it gets scary, because then that overshadows, like you said, that human connection, that empathy, that understanding, that, want to see a better humanity for everyone.
Yeah.
Because people are fearful. They're fearful about their economic situation, their safety, their future for their children.
100%.
But in this, capitalistic society we live in, that's what, is driving, I guess, the social, context is that fear.
100%.
And that, you should be worried about this person because they're going to do this. But I guess, yeah, it's like you said, it's how do we bring people back? How do we have more connection, more conversations, also based in, I think of something that's really hard these days is to have a conversation based around facts, because, people say, oh, that's not true, or there's this big pushback on what's true or what isn't true, depending on, which news station put it out, or no, that's not true because of this. That makes it really hard to have a conversation because facts aren't facts anymore. Yeah. They're opinions that
100%.
are interpreted different by different people. So it makes it a really challenging thing to kind of have those conversations when, you can be like, nah, that's not true. Or, and, like we've seen in Australia, Rupert Murdoch, he owns a big portion of the media, which means a lot of the views that people are seeing on mainstream television or radio or just in general.
His views.
His views and more conservative leaning views at that. Yeah. So it makes it, quite challenging when people are surrounded by fear-based media that also has people's own biases and prejudice in it as well.
Oh, 100%. But I also think and this is, again, my personal, and it's like, rednecks are so stupid. I'm just going to put it out there. Like, and it's like these people that they're backing at the same time making their lives so much harder. These, you look at the CLP, or you look at, the One Nation Party, or, like the Liberal Party that just got in Queensland. And it's like, everyone's like, tough on crime. But it's like, but let's flip it and look at something differently. And if we actually provide the care that these people need that are going through difficult situations that has led them now to making these decisions, let's put trauma-informed approaches in place instead of jail. And let's actually look at rehabilitation properly. In the long run, we're going to save so much cash as a government to have money to spend elsewhere, and then you look at, like I was saying before, like corporate taxes and the big giants that don't pay a cent in tax but make billions of dollars. That these people are voting and then they're complaining about, like things are hard and everything, and it's like, you guys voted these people in a sense. And so it's this crazy thing of fear mongering, I think, that really resonates with the conservative people in a sense, because they can't really make up their mind themselves. They can't look at things from a holistic perspective or just from a 360 view. It doesn't have to be holistic, but I think, there's no empathy, there's no anything, and they're just always ready for a fight, which is really sad because it's such a sad way to live, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. Completely. I think it's interesting as well, like you said, in terms of voting. It seems like people that are more conservative or redneck, the messaging by conservative politicians or liberal politicians in this country, if we were to vote based on, what's in our best interest, we would vote probably more progressive leaning
100%.
because obviously conservatives control a lot of the wealth.
Yeah.
And they're trying to maintain that as a standard of living for them and keep everyone else down.
And their networks,
But the way that they spin it is they pit like the middle class against each other. Yeah. So instead of us being like, actually, the people that earn all the money, we need to vote in our best interest so that they have to pay more tax and they, we have to, we get these benefits to help us get out of this position. Instead, their messaging pits the middle class against each other. That they make issues about, whether it's trans issues, they make that an issue and split up the middle class. They make issues around whether it's, identity or race or, like you said, crime. And so they're very smart, I feel like, at turning the middle class against each other when the real people with the power, all like profiting. And then they're, I guess, the people in the middle class, the messaging that they're sending and the misinformation campaigns are getting them to vote against their own best interest.
100%.
Which I find quite amusing. It's but also it speaks to how powerful, when you're at the top of these institutions and when you're at the top of media and in politics, how smart these people are in terms of being able to maintain this power and the systems that they set up and how everything is actually kind of, well thought through in a way to make sure that they stay exactly in the position that they've, I guess, profited off in terms of colonization.
Oh, 100%. And you look at even like, let's talk about, like government grants even like, so a government grant, depending on how it's specified in a contract, you most of the time end up paying, so you pay your GST, which is your 10%, and then you pay your BAS, which is like 30%, right? So realistically, 40% of that income that the government gave an organisation, let's say, goes back to the government, which is, it's just crazy. It's like, hang on, that money has come from us as people that pay tax, right? And that money is there for certain reasons to, address health, address homelessness, whatever it is. Yet it's such a funny thing. It's like, here you go, but we're going to take this back. But you've only got that to do. You're welcome, and it's like, but it's this crazy thing too that I see, especially working with in a leadership role now as well, is like it's like we have to be great. We're meant to be grateful, whereas it should be the other way. These people in these positions of power should be grateful for us and the people who vote them in and the people that they're representing in terms of their community. But, you look at, the Liberals and the two major parties, it's completely flipped.
Yeah. It's they act like they're doing your community a favour.
Which they're not.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying not all the time. We've got some amazing MPs and all of that do great work. But it's a minority.
Yeah.
Because you've got these people in there that are in there for the wrong reasons, or they went in there for the right reasons, but they lost their way because of greed, and whatever else. And so, like you said, if we just simply focused on, the key issues that, are valued to us, but also the future, like the way we're going, this country is going to look completely different. And it's going to be really sad because it's going to be destroyed. That's, and that's the crazy thing of like, we have evidence-based data and everything from professionals across the world that inform us, yet these people in these positions of power and don't agree, don't listen, and they're like, no, that's wrong. It's like, but that is a qualified person and multiple, so it's such an interesting thing. And then people then feed into it. It's like, how can you not see truth.
Yeah. No.
Truth.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, not that long ago, I went to a climate summit, and, some of the leaders in this field, like you said, talked to the fact that if we don't change drastically by, quite soon, we're facing quite dire circumstances, even in Victoria.
Yeah.
We're going to see a lot more rain, a lot more flooding, a lot more extreme events. And the commitments by the government and they're not good enough. Basically, by those dates, like, we committed in Paris to a climate agreement. Based on where we're going right now, we already can't reach that agreement. So like, it's just like, it seems, and back to the thing about the grants, it's like, oh no, we're doing something, but at the end of the day, it's not really anything.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
kind of
it's like
to
half,
say,
it's half-assed, really, and that's always the case, and then, there's all the hoops and everything you jump, and then, there's so many complexities around it. And we've gone off topic, but I think that's great. And we're like, for everyone watching, we don't have a script, we don't have anything, we just rock up and have yarns. And I think that's the beauty of this podcast, is because we talk about so many things. If we do bring it back, because it's all related, 100%, it's all related, because it's all the process, and it's how it all works.
And this is the social climate that we exist in.
100%.
And so the referendum on itself is a key issue, but it's impacted by all these other things. It's impacted by, people's economic situations. It's impacted by worldviews. It's impacted by, how people get their information. And so obviously the issues that we focus on are specific to our communities and First Nations communities, but it is impacted by the general population because they vote in. So like you said, it's all related. But I'll let you go. So where did, in terms of?
No, I was more just going to sort of say, like, it's such an interesting thing, because if, like, bring it back to the voice for a sec, the voice it's just the voice. And the crazy thing of how shit scared people were of us just having a voice was crazy. But not being able to see the incredible reciprocity of what would come from that voice for everyone. And so, I think the reciprocity would be the best word to describe what would have happened for everybody if it got through. And we look at, like you were talking about climate, if, we look at, and we're down on Wadawurrung country, we're in Victoria, bushfire season's coming up. But if we listen to First Nations people, and if First Nations people had a voice, there wouldn't be bushfires. There wouldn't be big, dangerous, well,
it would be
bushfires.
Healthy country, like we're
100%.
up in Darwin, where, we're lucky enough to go out traditional owner country and look at how healthy and beautiful and well kept it is. And
you got to actually do part of that burn. And then we got to watch that night, the burn. And the beauty of that was, it was the most beautiful thing, and it was controlled. It wasn't out of control, and it wasn't, whereas what we see down here in Victoria, when there is a bushfire, it's out of control, but also it's not just the floor, the ground level that gets burnt. And, it's the top of the trees, the canopies.
Crosses communities, crosses boundaries.
And that's not how country should burn. It should be just really minimal impact, because it's done properly and regularly. And it's done by watching the country, observing the country, feeling the country, and understanding the country. And, you like you said, kids, we got to do that. You guys got to do that burn up in the NT with Uncle Robbie. And, but you guys didn't see the beauty of what I saw, is because I had to go back and fix our trailer, because we broke it on the way out, because obviously the road, it's crazy. But it was the most beautiful thing. I got to drive back out there and see a couple of weeks later the result of that burn. And there was already green growth growing. It was beautiful. There was no buildup of, like, leaf litter or dead wood or anything like that. And there was animals thriving. Like, it's just that beautiful thing. And that's just one of the benefits of having a voice.
Yeah.
Is it's not just about us.
Yeah.
We're sharing knowledge with everybody.
To make this country better.
100%.
So
yeah, so we can all thrive.
Yeah, it's another, I guess, example of people voting against their best interest.
Yeah.
Which, you know, and obviously, yes, the voice probably wouldn't have fixed all the issues we see. But like you said, that respect and that feeling of, oh, this country values and sees the importance of our First People having a voice, and it also is going to benefit us.
Yeah.
I guess that's where, you know, it's disheartening. But at the same time, if we look maybe forward, and like you said, you know, you're pretty quick to get into that mindset, you and, you know, other leaders in community. Where do we go from here, and what's kind of, you know, you spoke about protecting and we spoke about being strong in our identity. But I guess what's not only where do we go as us as communities, but where do we go in terms of, because we're only 3%, so there's only so much change we can enact, or so much we can fight, or, you know, try to, how do we not only prepare ourselves as like First Nations communities, but how do we get more people and have more impact with the wider population to, I guess, see us and work together and be on this journey together?
Oh, 100%. I think that's such a good question. I think, it's where there's darkness, there's always light. And that's something I always talk about. And it's, you know, you'll have to, you'll have to go through the motions. You have to feel stuff and you have to endure things. But if you have, there is always light. And there's people around, you know, and so I think there's strength in numbers, but I think also, and this is my personal opinion, clear on that, is eventually all these old boomers, and I'm not saying all boomers are, you know, conservative. There is there's amazing people out there that back us and have great views and have, you know, understand, you know, the climate and that climate action is important and whatever else, you know. But a lot of these people are going to die out. That sounds so awful, but, you know, but then there's their children and their grandchildren. But I think there's hope in storytelling. There's hope in advocacy, and there's hope in people. I think, you know, there's power in people and there's power in numbers, and we see it, you know, every Jan 26, and, you know, across the country in the marches and a range of different protests and activities, you know, whether it's climate action, whether it's different community groups, or, you know, and
the war in Gaza.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's power in people.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that gets lost is the traction.
Yeah.
You know, I think that a lot, you know, when we see, you know, like the Black Lives Matter movement or the, you know, Jan 26 stuff, or, you know, whatever it is, there's always a period of time where it's like, you know, let's fight. But there's people that sort of come in and come out.
Yeah.
But we need those people to stay in. We need those people to stay in. We need them to stand tall with us and other community groups. And it's not, we just can't have it as I'm going to, you know, post a black tile, you know, or I showed up once to a march or whatever. It's like, no. If you're going to do it once, you got to keep going. You can't just stop, because it doesn't stop for us and other community groups. It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. And I think just to give some perspective to the comment you said before, traditionally, if you look at voting, you know, outcomes, it is older people that vote more conservative. And it is traditionally those that haven't gone to university or live more rurally. So in, you know, outback Australia, country Australia, that vote more conservative. And that, you know, is partly due to the misinformation they receive. They, you know, tend to believe it a lot more easily. It's due to, you know, older people that grew up in a more conservative time where a lot of rights for, whether it was women or trans people or, queer people or Indigenous people weren't there. So this is quite a big change,
100%.
which is change is always confronting. And so I think that's just, important to give the context, but also like you talked about the hope what we see in cities and places where there's higher education, especially among the younger generation, they vote a little bit more, or they lean a little bit more progressive in terms of how they think, because like you said, they're looking at the whole picture. And the more education we get as well, that tends to shift this, the spectrum to more progressive views as well. I think just to, like you said, in terms of the people, we need them to stay there. I think what is a little bit challenging at this time as well is, like you spoke about, the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, totally.
So people are finding it harder to walk alongside because they're a bit more internal at the moment, because
100%.
they're, scared about how they're going to pay their mortgage or, where their next meal is coming from or how they're going to keep the lights on. So I think like we spoke about before, we have issues in a vacuum, but it's impacted by all these other things
100%.
that are not to do specifically with our community, but have impacts on our community.
Totally.
So in a way, like by addressing the cost of living crisis, it allows people to probably donate more to Black Orgs or gives them more time or space to, be a part of us. So it's interesting how they're all interconnected, these issues in a way too.
Totally. But I think also, and not discounting it, but there's like those people that usually, that you speak about, that might, that might show up, but, now they're going through motions of stresses as well. It's like for them to understand, and it's no dig or anything. It's just like, hey guys, this is what we feel. This is what a lot of marginalised communities feel every day, 24/7, 365 days a week. It's like, if you, try to put yourself in other people's shoes. And when you are going through difficult times, remember that there are, that's a thing, that's a day-to-day basis for somebody else out there. And I think that's the key thing is empathy. Empathy is lost in a lot of ways, and it's not completely lost, but I think there's people, like you said, haven't got the time to sit and the time to understand and feel and all those things, because we're just living in this fast-paced world at the moment that's that loses value, and like I said, it goes back to just trying to get rich quick, and that whether it's fast fashion or whatever it is, it all contributes to social settings, whether it's the environment, whether it's the cost of living crisis, whether it's, the home, the property at, the property market at the moment, it all coexists based on, and like you said, there's all contributing factors.
And I think also another thing is when you look at, I guess it's a cultural difference, but in First Nations communities, it's, how can we all support each other?
Yeah.
And when you look at traditionally, non-Indigenous or, white colonial communities, it's how do we take care of our immediate family or myself?
Totally.
So it's very insular first, and then we help second.
100%.
But obviously in First Nations communities, it's usually the other way around. How do we take care of everyone?
100%.
And that will take care of us.
Totally.
And so I think that's what makes, that's that, disconnect. So when these people might, have their own things going on or their own fears, their first thought isn't how do we rally around the marginalized communities. Their first thought is how do we protect ourselves, because that's part of their culture. Like that's a cultural difference that I still feel like surprises non-Indigenous people today. When you speak about, examples of maybe things you'll do to help someone out, or, when, different examples, I'm sure you can list many. They're like, oh, wow, I can't believe, it kind of shocks them. They're like, oh, I can't believe, I would never do that 100%. In a way.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And it's like, and I think, it's just there's joy in young people and the younger generation, because like you said, there's lots of different contributing factors that allow them to see the big picture and the future and everything else. But also, and I'm privileged today, but didn't grow up with privilege. But with that privilege comes travel, or whatever. But and so I think there's lots of people out there that have never left their hometown. And, that's a massive contributing factor because it's literally, it's only what you see, and you can't see things from other perspectives as easily because you haven't traveled and everything. And I'm not giving them excuses or anything, but there's so many contributing factors. But I think just cautious of time, I think it's for those listening, it's just, looking at the referendum as a result. And I think we'll keep talking about it is, but also when it comes to issues that relate to you, I think really have a look, in terms of who you're voting for.
Yeah.
And, looking at where their donations come from.
Yeah.
Where their money comes from in terms of their supporting money and their donations and all their sponsorships, whatever, their values, and who they actually represent. Are they going to represent you, or are they going to represent someone that's going to
big corporation?
Yeah, that's going to make heaps of money, and you're going to get burnt in the end. And you're going to be in a situation like we are in now, where it's crazy to think that we are the biggest gas exporter in the world. We are the biggest. We export. We're the best place to have solar power and wind farms. And all these things, and all these big corps making so much money, yet we're paying so much money. We're paying ridiculous amounts in power bills, gas bills, all these different things, but they're making squillions as a collective, and then we're the ones paying for their wealth. Yeah. We're the ones contributing to all these wealthy people's wealth. And I think that's where the fear comes from, is if we actually take control of our voting rights and the system and everything, the world would be a better place for everybody. And the rich are going to survive. Like for us, they're set for life, for generations. We have hardly any blackfellas got generational wealth. Yeah, we're happy as, really, because we have what is important to us. Yeah,
which is that connection, that family, that identity,
100%.
that belonging.
100%. I think I'd love to ask you, what have you noticed from as a result, as the result, is what's stuck out for you?
The referendum?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we covered a fair bit of it, but I think probably how much disconnection and how much, whether it's hate and fear, how much impact that really has.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to, when you see the result, have hate yourself and, feel anger.
Yeah.
But I guess like we talked about before, a lot of the people that potentially, vote this way, maybe older, live, more in rural communities, typically not as educated.
Yeah.
And I think when we look at those factors, it gives kind of framework for how to address some of those things, provide more education, provide, more opportunities for, I guess, communities to get together and have conversations like this, and kind of look at, instead of feeling anger towards an outcome, kind of looking at, okay, these are the factors that contributed towards this outcome.
Yeah.
How can we address those factors, and how can we have conversations? How can we, live in that connection-based society that, we want to be a part of?
Yep.
But yes, similar things to what we spoke about. But I think, at the start, my initial reaction was just more that anger, and then it quickly turned to, okay, how did this happen?
Yep.
And what can we do to combat that, not just in our communities, but also to get that other 97% to see, what's happening and how we can make change as well. But no, I think this has been a pretty good kind of summation of the referendum. Obviously, we spoke about politics as a whole, and in terms of, the current environment and how we got to this point.
Yep.
And I'm sure we'll speak about it, you know, in different phases as we come into next year's election and things like that, because the themes will continue to trickle on.
Yep.
But I think, yeah, that was a pretty good conversation. Maybe we'll finish it there.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching this week's episode.
If you would like to see more of this type of content, like and subscribe.
If you want to support the work that we do at Strong Brother, Strong Sister,
Visit our website and make a donation today.
see ya!